We're doing a series of lessons we're calling Building the Kingdom and illustrating it with the book of Nehemiah, but our scripture text is taken from the book of Proverbs. Proverbs, the 30th chapter, where he talks about four little creatures that are exceedingly wise. In verse 26, he says, "The rock badgers are a feeble folk, and yet they make their homes in the crags or in the rocks." So I want to talk about the wisdom of security. The wisdom of security. And we're going to illustrate this with the rock badger, or some call it the hyrax. It's a little creature, not much larger than our chipmunks. It's a little animal, like a ground squirrel that lives in the rocks. What it does, it uses the security of the rock as its defense. It doesn't try to protect itself. No, it makes the rock its home. The rock becomes the place of refuge for it. Now, you can easily see how this relates to you and I as Christians. Matthew 16:18, Jesus said, "Upon this rock I will build my church." The rock, it's a place of security, and that's what the church is designed for you and I. See, the wise Christian finds safety from a cruel world by making the church his home. Boy, there is so much wisdom in that statement. Just a good church. I remember it was the great General Eisenhower that said, "You always attack from a safe base. Then if everything goes wrong, you've got a safe place to retreat to." That's wisdom. That's knowing that sometimes things don't work out the way we think they ought to. So that's this little creature. He makes the rock his home and finds safety by doing that. When the city walls are broken down, the people are defenseless. There's nothing to protect them. And that is the value in having these safe places within our lives. I think one of the reasons why Nehemiah was so sensitive to this, so he just knew this was the main problem that they were dealing with here, is because it begins in the book of Nehemiah, chapter 1 and verse 1. He said, "I was in Shushan, the citadel." Now notice that. The citadel literally means a fortress. I was in the stronghold of the king, and these people come from Israel, and they're telling me the walls of Jerusalem are broken down. And he is very, very sensitive to their need because he understands the value of a safe place. Oh, I wish everybody understood that. He realized the value of having strong, secure walls around you to protect you from the inevitable attacks that's going to happen in life. It will take place. We live in a very, very cruel world where people experience all kinds of bad things that happen to them. But if you're in a safe place, it protects you from so many of these dangers. So Nehemiah, the first chapter, verse 3, it opens up with these words. "The survivors who are left from the captivity are in great distress and reproach." Now notice what they're saying to Nehemiah. He's asking questions. What's happened to them? And they're telling him they're in great distress and reproach. That's where they are. Now, here's some questions I need to ask you. I think this helps to establish what we're talking about. These people that were in Israel, that returned to Jerusalem, were they God's people? Of course they were God's people. That's why they had returned to Jerusalem, was because they wanted to return back to the land of their fathers, to the land of their God, the land God had given to them. Of course they were God's people. Another question I would ask you then, was it God's will for them to return to Jerusalem? We know the answer is yes. Of course they should return to Jerusalem. So how can they be God's people doing God's will in great distress and reproach? Well, I ask you a question. Have you ever known a Christian in trouble? Have you ever known a Christian depressed? A Christian living in reproach? Of course, we all have. What's the problem? The same problem Nehemiah was facing. The walls of Jerusalem were broken down, and its gates were burned with fire. Wow, what a graphic picture to help us to understand how we need to build safe places in our lives. So let me talk about 3 different things that Nehemiah does in rebuilding this city. Here's this strategy. It begins with the city gates. That's where it starts. It began with the city gates. And you'll find that in chapter 3 and verse 1. That's where they started. He began with the restoration, building the gates of the city. What do the gates represent to us? Gates control the people who have access into our lives. In other words, every one of us are listening to somebody. Who are you listening to? Many times, we listen to the wrong voices. The gates control the access of the people coming and going out of the city, the flow of information. That's what we are experiencing. The gates represent authority in our lives. Who are the authorities? And they're there. As I said, everybody has them. Everybody has somebody they're listening to. But some people are listening to the wrong voices. They don't have proper authorities in their life. And because of that, their lives are in reproach. Their lives are in great distress, just like these Israelites were living. Without the gates of the city is defenseless. It cannot control the flow of information. And in fact, in what we live in today is called the information age. And I really believe that's an accurate description because knowledge is increasing so rapidly. We went through the industrialization age, and now we're into the information age, and it's just exploding around us. But the truth is, much of that information is nothing but lies. I mean, with just a click on your computer, you can gain all kinds of information. You can ask all kinds of questions as we Google it, just ask the question and, but do you realize you can click on your computer and you'll find that Hitler is still alive, that he never died. You'll find, some of the craziest of ideas that are out there on the internet. One of my favorite quotes is Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln is reported, he said, "You can't believe everything you read on the internet." Oh, I believe that. That is a good one because it's an information age, and yet so much of the information is lies. Lies that have been told to us. How are you going to know the truth? The proper gates within your life. There ought to be somebody that you can trust that knows what they're talking about. They've been there, they've done that, they've experienced that. They're talking from wisdom. That's what he's talking about with the gates. These are the authorities that know what is truth and what is not truth in our life. The Bible said that it was the priest that led this, and I think that's beautiful because it's a good picture for the church. Spiritual leaders ought to lead when it comes to restoration, and they did. The priests rose up, and what did they start doing? They began building the sheep gate. Now, I cannot read that. It's Nehemiah chapter 3 and verse 1, and you quote it, "And Eliashib, the high priest, rose up with his fellow servants, the priests, and built the sheep gate." Why that is so imprinted in my mind is because many years ago, as a young preacher, I'm praying over the book of Nehemiah. I'm studying the book of Nehemiah, and I've just read that verse about Eliashib, the high priest, rising up with his fellow servants, the priests, and building the sheep gate. And bam, just like that, the Holy Spirit spoke to me. I mean, it's clear. He said, son, do you know what you spent most of your ministry doing? Well, that stopped me. I stopped and thought, and because he's building the sheep gate. And I said, no, Lord, I don't know. And he spoke to me again and said, you spent most of your time trying to tear down the goat gate. And I realized how true that was. I was focused on all the wrong things people were doing. I was focused on all the negatives, and I needed to refocus on the positive. And so this is where he begins. He begins by building the sheep gate. And I would encourage you, it's the first thing that you need to do if you're going to establish a life that has security, is find out who are the proper authorities that God has put in your life. There are people around you that are smarter than you are. There are people around you that are wiser than you are. Who are you listening to? That's where he starts, by building the gates. Now, the second thing he does, after they have built the gates, they start working on the city walls, rebuilding the walls. And as I said, I find that interesting. He began with the gates rather than the walls. But after rebuilding these city gates, he begins the reconstruction of the walls. But he immediately discovered they could not rebuild the walls yet. Why? There's too much rubble. There's too much garbage, too much trash that's been left from the past. Now, what is rubble? Rubble, of course, these were the huge rocks and everything that had been thrown out after the city had been destroyed. Rubble is nothing more than the trash of yesterday. It's all those negative things, many things that should have never happened in the first place, but they did happen, and you're going to have to deal with it. That's what Nehemiah discovers. They've got to clear away the rubble before they can build the walls. And the same is true in our life. We're never going to be able to build strong relationships as long as we're carrying around a lot of garbage. You've got to get rid of the rubble of the past to be able to build the walls for the future. Now, what are walls? Walls are basically the things that surround us, the things that protect us from what's outside the walls. That's what the walls are. And what this represents in our lives is our covenant relationships. Now, I use the word covenant there to emphasize, I'm talking about long-term relationships. Now, not every relationship is going to be that way. Some relationships are short-term. As they say, we have friends for a reason and friends for a season, but then there are some friends that are friends for a lifetime. That's what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about long-term relationships. I'm not in this just for today and see what I can get out of it right now. No, I'm thinking about the future. I want to build a relationship. That's a wall. A wall. They surround us. Family. God intended family to be a part of our covenant relationships. Family is sacred because family is God's idea. He's the one that created family. No, it wasn't society. It certainly wasn't the devil. The devil's always trying to destroy our relationships. And so we need to protect our relationships, covenant relationships. And I know in every family, you're going to have some people that we say we have some in-laws and some outlaws. You know, every family is that way. You've got some that are good relationships. You can't wait to see them, and there's others you get nervous when you know they're coming. I mean, every family's that way. I believe God designed it that way. Why? Because eternity's going to be a long, long time, and we got to learn how to get along with each other. It's one of the mysteries that I never could understand about Christians, why they want to go to heaven, spend eternity with people they don't like. I mean, can you figure that out? It doesn't make sense, does it? But relationships, long-term relationships, friends. Friends are sacred because it's God that touched their hearts. I mean, why do they like you? Have you ever stopped and took a close look in the mirror? I mean, why is it they're attracted to you? I use this scripture from 1 Samuel 10 and 26, and it's talking about King Saul, just when he's becoming king, and it says, there went with him a band of men whose hearts God had touched. I like that. That's a good way of saying it. A friend is somebody that knows the things that are not good about you, and they like you anyway. That's who a friend is. They choose you no matter what. A friend. And so it becomes sacred. We should make friends, as much as we can, friends that last a long time. Now, something else I want to emphasize here about the wall. When you start building the wall, you're at ground level. You're right where actually you had to bend over to build. You had to humble yourself to build it at first, but then it becomes waist high. Then it gets up to your head, and now it's over your head. Here's my point. The higher you build the wall, the more difficult the work becomes. Now you have to climb the ladder to be able to work on the wall. The same is true in our relationships. And I think it's one of the reasons that we allow some relationships just to be destroyed, is because we're not interested in putting the effort into it to keep building the wall. I encourage you, don't stop building the wall. Keep building your relationships. Yes, it will get more difficult. The older we get, the more we get into into energy management, because we don't have the energy we used to, but we need to keep building the wall. Don't allow the wall to turn into rubble. Now, it takes more effort to build lasting relationships. And I think that's one of the reasons that some people, they just go from relationship to relationship to relationship, because it's easy at first before they get to know you. You don't have to be so nice. You don't have to work on it, and before you learn the things that you don't like about them, everybody's wonderful when you first meet them. They're all smiling, but after a while, it takes more effort. It takes more effort. Don't allow your relationships to fall into ruin. Keep building the wall. Stay focused upon that. And that's what we find that Nehemiah does. And sometimes that can be very difficult in life. Now let me give you this principle in connection with building the walls. This one has helped me a whole lot. Never forsake a proven relationship for an unproven one. Now let me repeat that, because those words were shared with me, and how I have gleaned from that. Never forsake a proven relationship for a proven one. The unproven relationship, I said that backwards. Never forsake a proven relationship for an unproven one. Why? Well, it may seem very nice right now. It may look beautiful, looks great. But what about 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What about the future? Those that are proven to be friends, that they've been with you through good times and bad times. They've been there. They've been for you even when, it wasn't pretty. They've been there during the difficult days. Those are proven relationships. And it's more than just a cliche. A friend in need is a friend indeed. Boy, that is the truth. And so you need to do this in your life. And it's what Nehemiah had to do, to build the walls. And if we don't build the walls, we are always going to be vulnerable for attack of the enemy. It will happen sooner or later. Now, let's talk about the third area. Not only does he build the gates, build the walls, but he builds what's called watchtowers. Watchtowers. He builds these along the wall. In fact, almost every city gate was also a watchtower. They would build it higher than the rest of the wall. They would fortify it because when the attacks come, this has got to be a strong place that you have built. Watchtowers. Now, here's what it represents. It represents those elevated places that have been fortified against attack. There's some things that you just got to do extra for. Some things that you've got to make them extra strong. You've got to go extra effort for it. Fortify it. Build it higher than the rest of the wall. And as I've already said, the higher you build, the more difficult it becomes in building it. But you need these fortified places. They're watchtowers. What do? They provide extra vision to the city. They help you to see farther than you can see from the wall or definitely down from behind the wall. You need watchtowers in your life. What they do, they help us to be able to see beyond ourselves. And I use a picture here of a radar system because in modern warfare, this is what happens. In modern warfare, the first thing that the enemy wants to do is knock out the radar system. If they can knock out the radar system, it's what they call now they're fighting blind. They can't see the attack coming because the radar system is gone. See, that's what the watchtowers did. The watchtowers are the eyes of the city. They help you to see things that others cannot see. They help you to make wise decisions, to know when to open the gates and when to close the gates. I hope you're listening to me. God help us. How we need to build these in our lives. We need people in our life. I have a brother in my life, Dr. Charles Green, and oh my, what a blessing he has been to me. He is 93 now and still strong in the Lord. And I will say to him at times, Brother Charles, when I grow up, I want to be like you. Because when I'm 93, I want to be doing what he's doing. God bless him. But the wisdom that he has from the experiences and he's done things I've never done. I'm able to learn from that. Everybody needs somebody in their life that's like Dr. Green, a watchtower, or they are a spiritual father to you, a spiritual mother to you. Who is that person in your life that you can go to? You need to identify them. You need to build those relationships. And I can remember very clearly the day when I went and I talked to Brother Green and I said, Brother Green, please, I don't want to be an orphan. I don't want to try to do this alone. I need a spiritual father. Would you be a spiritual father to me? I'll try not to bother you too much, but there's sometimes I need somebody to talk to. I need somebody to pray for me. I need somebody to give me counsel. And my, has he done that in my life. That's what a watchtower is. The watchtower is the first line of defense for the city. They're always watching, scanning the horizon, watching for any kind of attack, or sometimes they can even see the blessings that are coming. Here comes a good caravan. They're bringing all kinds of goods to the city. The watchtowers are the first one to spot that. We all need that within our lives. We need people that we've developed those kind of relationships so that we are able to be defended against the attacks that will happen sooner or later in our life. And so this is the way that Nehemiah went about doing it. He builds the watchtowers. We have to understand as spiritual leaders, Nehemiah, the 3rd chapter in verse 17, you find where God says to to Ezekiel, he said to him, I have set you as a watchman on the wall. And as spiritual leaders in the church, we have to understand that's our position. We are watchmen, or watch ladies, if you prefer. We are those that are the eyes, and we're looking, we are watching. God has given us that position, an elevated position, because of maturity, experience, what we've been through. God has set us as watchmen upon the wall. Now, this is the way that Nehemiah fortified the city. First the city gates, then the city walls, and then the watchtowers. I believe it is an excellent example for you and I, what we need to do in building covenant relationships, long-term relationships. I don't know about you, but I plan to be back tomorrow. I plan to be back next week, next month, next year. I'm not planning on checking out anytime soon. I'm planning on staying around for a while, and I want to build those kind of relationships that's going to last to the end of my life. If we'll do that, we are like the little rock badger. He may be a small, weak little animal, but he's found security in the rock. And if we found that and built that, you have to build it. When you built that in your life will be secure. No matter what the attacks are, no matter what the devil tries to do to you, he's going to find Jesus has built his church upon the rock. Build your family upon the rock. And if you'll do that, you're going to find yourself in a secure place when the storms come. And I'm so thankful, I'm so happy at this point in my life that God has helped me to be able to build long-term relationships. I value that, covenant relationships, because it brings security. I cannot tell you the blessings and benefits that come because of that. And so if you don't have that within your life, I encourage you, start today. Start building it. Start working on it, developing those kind of covenant relationships. And if you do, God will bless you in your Christian journey. So may God continue to bless you as you follow Christ, as you build the relationships that He has given to you in life. Establish them, and God will make you strong in your Christian experience. May God bless you.